Welcome to the Principal Podcast, where we talk about how the best professional services firms grow. Whether you're looking to scale your firm or learn from the stories of founders and leaders who've done it, you're in the right place. Join us as we interview the best leaders in professional services. Let's get on with the show.
Good afternoon, everyone. Today we have an opportunity to speak with a very interesting individual who started a company that is called Actualize Consulting. Chad Wekelo has a company that he started off basically consulting back in the early 2000s, and now it's blossomed into a specialized consulting company with a lot of business across the U.S. and internationally. So we're going to talk to Chad now about all the beginning of his company, how he started it, how he got involved in the consulting industry, but more importantly, what his goal was with this company. So we're going to start off by saying, Chad, good afternoon. Tell us a bit about what got you into consulting in your specialty.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I appreciate it. Coming out of university, I started in the consulting with a larger consulting firm. So I sort of got that exposure right off the bat. There was definitely things I enjoyed and liked about it, other things maybe not so much. And so then I had an opportunity to work at that larger, very, global, thousands of people company. And then from there, I went to actually work at a smaller company. I think I was the fourth employee. And so then I got the other side. It was still in the consulting business, but I got the other side of the paradigm with a smaller company trying to help it grow. And then that was sort of the launching point of, okay, I like this business. I've seen some different varieties of how it operates, the good, the bad, the ugly. And then from there, I had the view that I was interested in starting my own consulting firm, and then sort of being able to specialize on certain areas that we wanted, being able to focus and take some of the things that I thought were good and take some of the things that maybe I thought could be done differently, incorporate that into our Actualize brand.
Well, when you look at, you started it in 2003, am I right?
That's right, yeah.
So you've been doing it now for 23 plus years. Obviously, you must be doing something right, or you still wouldn't be doing it. So tell me, what is it you feel are the major problems you solve for your clients, and why is that important to you?
Yeah, so over the years, what we do is evolved, but I'd say fundamentally, we're more in that business process redesign, optimization part of the business. So what that means is, we're trying to basically look at the company's people, processes, and technology, and we're trying to find ways to optimize those. For at the moment, we really specialize within companies, more of their capital markets and their treasury functions, very large multinational corporates. And so as companies, luckily the business environment is very dynamic. There's regulations, there's acquisitions, there's just normal organic growth. And so people are always sort of trying to keep up, right? As the business evolves, what you do from your day-to-day task to manage that is always changing. And so those changes provide opportunities for us. Companies merge, companies divest, regulations come on into play that didn't exist previously. These are all change elements that need to be managed, and being able to understand how they impact the organization and then very quickly put processes and technology in place to be able to accommodate them is where we sort of have our niche and our spot. And then again, within that, it's that capital markets and treasury space. And there's just been a ton of evolution. As far as what we do, I say we just are very specialized, right? So from a firm, we're specialized within that space, whether it be the regulations, the technology, the processes. Those are areas that we sort of are involved in every day and get to see it across a wide variety of companies. And so when you're trying to solve that problem, and maybe you've been at one or two companies, you just don't have that perspective to understand the best way to tackle it. And so a lot of times people come to us because we're lucky to see across hundreds of different clients, and then how they've tackled that problem, and then try to understand each individual's company's problems, and then tailor a solution for them based on our experience.
So when you do this, there's got to be what I would call an ICP, an ideal client profile. Tell me, who are the customers that you more often than not end up working with, and do you target those customers when you do your business development?
Yeah, for us, because we have a mix of capital markets and treasury, I think specifically large multinational corporations that have complexity across both their more cash and treasury liquidity operations, as well as risk around foreign exchange risk, interest rate risk, commodity risk. That more complex business, global, multinational, is really our ideal client fit because of the complexities that that exist. It makes sense to bring in somebody to help because the benefits that they're going to achieve are exponential to a smaller firm who may have the same problems. Maybe they have a subset of those problems because they may not have the global exposure, but those are the clients that we're able to make the biggest change impact for, and really show our value proposition more.
Well, and obviously you must go there based on a variety of different marketing techniques. I mean, I would think with what you guys do, there's a lot of ways you can get to your clients. Probably the biggest one would be referrals because you've worked with people similar in scope, size, and done a good job, and therefore they can use them as a reference to get to somebody else, or they leave and go somewhere else, and they've already worked with you, and so they bring you in. Then you've got obviously going through marketing campaign, whether it be in conferences, you might do it through LinkedIn, you may do it through other media sources, social media. Tell me which ones are the best for you getting your name out into the business world for clients to know who you are.
Yeah, I mean, I sort of view it as a multi-pronged strategy. I think you covered a couple of them. I guess maybe one I'll add before answering your question is partnerships. So whether it be, I'll call them channel partnerships, some of those can be direct, like sales opportunities. So we do in our space, we're integration partners for certain software companies, and so we are certified on their products. We can install them, and so that's a direct channel for sales. And then there's other avenues such as people who sell into the same clients and even the same departments, but are selling different things. There's like recruiters we've worked with, there's lawyers that we've worked with. I mean, there's different professionals that are sort of serving that same space, but what they're selling is different. And so we've networked through that capacity as well, and educated them on what we do, understood what they do, and then when we find joint opportunities, we're able to sort of provide those over and make those introductions. So I guess as far as what's most successful, I think you need a bit of each of them to sort of have a holistic presence and then generate consistent revenue. Because if you're too dependent on one, it may sort of dry up, or it may not be as fruitful as it was in the past. But
that's not a good business strategy. You're right. So having diversity is critical. Have you ever thought about the methodology of podcasts or being on these podcasts? How do they do for you?
I think, we haven't seen a ton of like direct business driven from them, but what we do see is that if, depending on the topic that we have, when we engage with people, it gives some credibility and some validity to it. Because they're like, oh, they research you inevitably, and they're like, oh, I saw this, article that you guys posted. And that's usually where it helps us. It gives us that in the door the first time they see us. There's the level of credibility that we already have because some of that exposure. And every now and then we will get contacted like directly from them, but it's not as frequent as it is. But again, I mean, that's important, right? Because we may not have gotten that call when they Google us, and if they find something that's not really a good fit for us, or we don't feel like we're legitimate, then we might not have even gotten that call anyway. So I think, again, all of those things are beneficial to that overall brand, overall recognition, and credibility that we need in the industry to be successful.
The critical thing is you're doing the right thing. If you have just one independent marketing channel and something goes south on that and have no fallback, you're in trouble. You've got a good blend, it sounds like, between all the different ways you go. So let's talk about when you actually get a client to engage with you, whether it be through a referral or LinkedIn or whatever methodology, a conference you spoke at. Now they're talking to you. So from contact, when you initially meet them have that discussion, have a meeting to when it actually turns into fruition in a contract. What's your normal selling cycle like in that business you're in?
Yeah, it varies as you would expect. It can be anywhere to, we have a client who has an immediate need. They heard, usually this is a situation, it's a referral, a client referral.
Right.
And they have an immediate need. Somebody already sort of pre-validated us and said, you have to use Actualize, which is our favorite type of introduction, obviously. And those could literally be like under a month to go from there to sales. And then there's others where you're introduced to clients. They may be more in the exploratory stage of things. And oftentimes the clients are open. Like they're like, oh, we're exploring this for, a 2027 budget. But we need some assistance now trying to help put our budget numbers together. And so we have sales cycles that are up to like 18 months in some cases. In some cases, we know, that the client it's a longer term opportunity. And sometimes we don't know. And, we're spending a lot of effort throughout the process. But obviously we've learned what questions to ask to sort of validate the sale, validate the opportunity, and hopefully, not to say we won't spend time with clients, but, make sure we're spending the right amount of time with them, and, maybe tell them that we're happy to engage when you guys, when you have X, Y, Z in place, maybe let's re-engage, right?
Tell me a bit about, you got different stakeholders within your companies you go after. You've got people that are decision influencers who might be initial point of contact, or you might be with the C-suite and now you're at decision-making level. Are there committees involved, multiple people in different departments, or usually can you find one point of contact that can make the decision to initiate your services?
Yeah, I think it's very rare where there's one decision maker in the process. Sometimes we're lucky enough that those conversations have already been had internally and they've already gotten approval, and then they're just in the decision making process, and they'll loop people into the conversation. And but it's very rare that it's a single point of contact, given, again, we're working largely with the multinational corporations. It's usually not a single point of decision from that perspective.
Yeah, I wouldn't think so, but I'm just always curious because, you have a different sale when you have to go through multiple departments or different heads of different areas. And therefore that would prolong the decision-making cycle a little bit, I would think.
Yeah.
Just by the nature of the multinational companies. Am I right?
It definitely can prolong it. From our perspective, that's okay, right? I mean, we want the scope and the everybody to be sort of aligned, because if we've started some projects where that hasn't been the case, and maybe we did talk to fewer people, and then when you get in the project, you realize a bunch of issues and you're sort of having to go back and redo that stuff already, and it eats into your budget and it eats into other things. So honestly, like it's acceptable, and I think it's actually appropriate to have that conversation. It may elongate the sales cycle, but once we start the project, we feel like we're actually aligned holistically across all the stakeholders, as well as us, and the scope of what we've agreed to do for them. And the projects just go much more smoothly at that point in time. So I'd rather spend a little bit more time and get that right than get a quicker sale and then find out we missed things as we started the project.
Still have more work to do.
Yeah.
Exactly. So let's talk about client retention. So I initiate business with one of your clients, and now I'm in the process of doing the project, the statement of work, whatever it was laid out. How do you measure, and how do they measure the metrics of have you been successful?
Yeah, so we actually, I don't know how many years ago, but a number of years ago, we actually initiated, as part of our initial project planning, a set of KPIs for every project. So we actually built out like a standard set of KPIs that just to give the clients a starting point, just to sort of think about. But not all clients actually take us up on this, but we strongly encourage to go through that and spend time up front actually defining the KPIs, so key performance indicators of the project specifically for every individual engagement. And then once we define those, we'll embed those into our actual like weekly status reporting, project planning, so that we can actually continue to measure them and evaluate them throughout the project. So that's been, when clients take the time to do that, we find definitely a better outcome, and a better alignment from that perspective. And, not to say it won't evolve. I mean, projects always evolve, but at least it's something that is front of mind, and we're not coming back at the end of the project and asking them, oh, how did we do? We're sort of measuring it all throughout the project, and that's been most successful for us.
Well, and then with clients, do you do a contract? You like a 90-day, a 6-month, an annual? Does it have a renewal clause in it? And how do you get your clients to continue to work with you going forward after you do an initial period of time of what they hired you for?
Yeah. Most of our projects are deliverable based. They usually have rough timelines that we would sort of initiate and plan to achieve, but they're usually very specific to a set of deliverables that we're providing to the clients. Those deliverables can be anywhere from a month to 18 months, something even longer in some cases. I would say most of our contracts, clients usually budget in annual cycles. So even if the project is 18 months, usually our contract's no more than 12 months. And so that's sort of how the contracts work. And it's very focused on a set of deliverables that we've agreed to in that scoping exercise that we talked about a minute ago. As far as, ongoing work, we actually measure our sort of client retention by the ability, like how long clients have worked with us and repeat business that we have. And I think every year it's slightly different, but it's usually around like 70% is the business that we have each year is from existing clients that have asked for additional services. And so that's a metric that's pretty, in my mind, pretty important and pretty indicative of how we're doing in that business. And, sometimes you do a great job and the project's over and they don't need any more deliverables. So it's not like you did a bad job. But, when you work with bigger clients, they tend to have needs, even if it's smaller in nature. But as far as how we achieve that part of success, it's very funny to me. I've been in this business a while, as you mentioned earlier, but, we're in a service business, right? We're providing consulting services, but it's we see a lot of people, I think, lose sight of that in the consulting business, that this is a service-based business. And, we're there to help the client. We're there to make them successful. We agreed to a set of deliverables, and that's our main focus. And, people seem to lose sight of that quite often. So I think, it's a very prominent thing in our discussions internally of client service. We need to understand what the client needs. We need to listen to what they need, and we need to deliver, right? We need to make sure we have the right teams, and we need to make sure we have the right tools, expertise. And so for us, that's a sort of a you probably are not in any meeting that we have internally where that's not something that we talk about. And it's something that, to me is like the foundation of our success, is being able to have those clients that are happy. As you mentioned previously, that's a big part of our sales opportunities. It's not only for new clients, but also for those existing clients that, sign up for new services. And so I think just being sort of relentless on that client satisfaction and services, and continue to sort of, ask them what they need and make sure that we're putting the right place and the teams in place to achieve that is, I mean, if I had to say like one thing that has been the success of our business, like I could boil it down into that, if that was the only option I had.
Well, there you go. I mean, that's always important. You have satisfied clients, and that's why they'll come back or tell other people. Tell me about your team for just a moment. Do you have different consultants who you assign to a client? Do you initiate the contact or contract and then disperse your team to try and facilitate the contract?
Yeah. So in all cases, yes, we have a team that will deploy on the project. Obviously depends on the scope, depends on the needs. And, luckily we have a lot of people who've been with us for quite a while. So we sort of have a pretty good sense of what individuals we need to be successful in the project in different roles across somebody managing the project, somebody leading, and then obviously people executing, both from a functional and technical perspective. And so a lot of times we're just understand the scope, and then we'll internally determine the team. There are some clients who want to speak to people beforehand, which we're happy for them to speak to people as well, because we want to make sure they feel comfortable. But definitely that team structure is important, because we found to be quite open, right? There's certain people who just we can't put on the same project together for one reason or another. It
Yeah.
just doesn't work, and so we've had to be very mindful of that and make sure that we have teams that collectively can be successful.
Yeah, there's a whole art to that. The coordination of the right personality type on your team to the personality on theirs, interpreting which ones will work harmoniously versus potentially clash. That orchestration, but you still have to realize they still have to have the skills you need. So sometimes they have to adapt to the client, obviously. So tell me a bit about as you look ahead, balance of this year into next year, where do you see the biggest challenges in your business growth?
Yeah, for us, we're a people business, right? I mean, we it's probably not the best business model, but we scale by adding additional headcount for the most part to our team, right? Through consultants. So, we're providing deliverables, often sometimes fixed fees, sometimes time, hourly based on people's billings. And so people have always been our number one challenge is, finding the right people that, in our business, you you have to have the right technical expertise, both from a industry perspective and also technology. You have to be able to interact with people, and as you said a minute ago, you have to be adaptable, right? Because every client you have, they're going to have different personalities, they're going to have different
Unique. Yeah.
levels of understanding, and then you have to sort of be able to work in that team environment. A lot of our work is remote, so you have to be sort of independent, but also team oriented. And then for us, what we found is that working together is important. So the culture element, you have to sort of be bought in, drinking the Kool-Aid, so to speak, of what we're trying to do culturally. And so it's very multi-dimensional as far as finding the right candidate, and it's difficult, right? Because we're trying to grow, we're trying to scale, but then finding the right people at the right time with all those elements in place is has been our challenge since we began.
Yeah, you think about that, that's one of the biggest challenges because there's only one of you, Chad. And the reality is I always counsel people that I develop in management that they have to deal what's best for their client. There's not going to be able to clone each other. I don't know that's allowed in human beings as of right now. So since we can't clone you, Chad, you have to try and find the people that can do your job as efficiently as possible if you're going to try and get out there to get more clients. And that is a challenge. I mean, personnel and getting that's a big issue for you. So where do you see the biggest growth opportunity, not challenge, opportunity in the years ahead for you?
Yeah, for us, we've grown geographically to, I think we're in 6 different countries now at the moment. And so that's been and definitely an area of growth, but also challenge, and making sure that we're providing the same services, the same quality across the different regions. But that geographic expansion and being able to serve those markets, a number of them are in growth markets as well, is a big opportunity for us. Like if we're able to take what we've been successful in the markets that we're in currently, and then replicate that in those new markets, that's going to be a big opportunity for us, not only from a growth perspective, but also even just serving, as I mentioned, we work with a lot of multinational companies, so it gives us even additional scale within those companies to work with their team in China or their team in Mexico. And so being able to sort of engage with them in, from a local time zone perspective and a local language is definitely advantageous to us. And we see opportunity there. The other opportunities that, as I mentioned before, that change of processes and people and how technology evolves within the organization is something that's constantly evolving, and that keeps opportunities for us. And the thing that you can't you literally go probably half a day without hearing is AI. And so it's definitely an area that we see the biggest opportunity within organizations, and it's a huge challenge, right? For these big organizations, the technology works, right? And it exists today, but actually using it successfully within these big multinational corporations is a huge challenge that people are really struggling with. And people are spending a lot of money on it now. Probably not. You're starting to see more news coming out.
Yeah.
Well, and you're starting to see news come out now. People are starting to question, well, I'm spending all this money. What's my actual ROI on this? And so, trying to think about how you structure that. What are the steps? What is the infrastructure that you need to have in place before you start layering the technology on top of it? And then what are the specific use cases that are going to be most advantageous and give you the biggest bang for your buck is areas that we're really focused on, because we've seen people spend a lot of money on it, but I would say the ROI has been lacking from what we've seen thus far. And so that's the area that we're really trying to help people capitalize on the technology that exists within these organizations. And I mean, it's definitely coming, but I mean, companies are really struggling with it, and it's going to have its challenges.
I think you nail it, because I had almost thought we were going to get through this entire discussion and AI would not be mentioned. We were right there, man. We were at the finish line. But anyway, it's reality. And it's an important component that everyone has to plan for. And if you're able to manage it efficiently, use it as a tool, I believe it's designed to be, not a replacement, but a supplement and a complement to what you do, and you guys can help them integrate that. That would be something that I would think would be very important. And it is reality. It is an opportunity as well as a challenge. And so if you look at both and how to manage those efficiently, I think you can be a critical asset for the clients you work with. So, Chad, you may not believe it, but our 30 minutes is already blown by, man. We've had a great dialogue back and forth. I hope you've enjoyed it. I know I have. I learned some things that I didn't know about you for sure, and about what you guys are trying to accomplish. I love the multinational facet and the growth opportunity you have there. I think it's got great potential. And what I want to do is make sure now people can understand what's the best way to reach you, Chad, and your company as the audience listens, to make sure they can figure out what they might want to do with your company going forward. What's the best method to do that?
Yeah, I mean, we're very active on LinkedIn. So, Actualize Consulting, we have our own sort of page there. You can follow us. You can contact us there directly. We have forms on our website, actualizeconsulting.com, that if you want to get in touch with us, you can just submit a request through that form, and we'll get back to you very promptly. I think those are probably the two best methods, and we'd love to hear from you guys.
Okay. Well, Chad, thank you for your time today. We've really enjoyed the discussion. I hope you have, and I know the audience has. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Principal Podcast. We hope you've learned valuable lessons and strategies to grow your firm and take your business to the next level. Make sure to subscribe and leave us a review wherever you're listening to this show so you never miss an episode. To apply and be a guest on the show, click the link in the description. See you next time.